My name's Hector Rivero. I'm the president and CEO of the Texas Chemical Council, and delighted to be moderating our sustainability panel today. As many of you know, the business of chemistry is driving innovations that are leading sustainable solutions for our planet. In this day and age, sustainability is part of doing business. What most people do not realize is chemistry is the science behind sustainability. Our industry has been innovating for further reductions of our environmental footprint, but also providing sustainable solutions for other industries across the world. These innovations are critical if we are to succeed in combating climate change and sustain our quality of life for future generations. The products and innovations of chemistry make our homes and buildings more energy efficient, our cars and planes lighter, faster, and more energy efficient. Also, renewable technologies like wind turbines and solar panels and batteries are more viable energy solutions through the innovations of chemistry. Today, I'm honored to welcome a panel of industry and academic experts who will help illustrate just a few of the sustainability initiatives that are being led by the petrochemical industry. Now, our panel's full bios are in your program, so let me introduce them and we'll jump right in to the conversation. I'm going to start by introducing Craig Cookson, who's the Senior Director of Plastics Sustainability with the American Chemistry Council. And Craig, our modern world cannot exist without plastics. But industry is taking a great deal of stride to make sure that we can all live with plastics sustainably. So tell us about the work of ACC and the chemical industry and what is being done to make plastics more sustainable.
Yeah, thank you, Hector, and thank you for having me here today. It's interesting you said that our modern world, right, we wouldn't have a modern world without plastics and petrochemicals. I know folks saw the announcement from Michael Bloomberg yesterday, but disappointing in that sort of targeting an entire industry that does so much for sustainability, enables our modern life all over the globe. So the American Chemistry Council, we're the trade association for the chemical manufacturing industry in the US. And I'm in the plastics division, which is a subset of that membership of companies that make plastic resins, including Chevron, Phillips, and pretty much everybody here. We also have a value chain membership that enables converters and advanced recyclers and additive suppliers and others to be members of the ACC. And we lead on advocacy, both from a policy standpoint and communicating the benefits of the industry. So we do a lot of work on life cycle, resin LCAs, to make sure that key stakeholders, downstream converters and brands and others can model their products and packaging on the best available data. We think about how we communicate to policymakers the benefits that plastics have in all sorts of markets, from building and construction to automotive to packaging and other products. But we do have a challenge, right? If you look at the EPA numbers, only about 9% of all plastics, and that includes packaging, non-durable goods, and durable goods, get recycled. For packaging, it's a little bit higher, about 13 to 14%, but still not good enough. So back in 2018, our members, America's Plastics Makers, committed that by 2040, 100% of plastics packaging would be reused, recycled, or recovered. So essentially 0% of plastics packaging to landfill. And that's a goal that lines up very well with Plastics Europe as well. So our members, of course, didn't want us to just luck into or hope that we achieve the goal. So we went about and we designed a roadmap to reuse about how we would achieve that. There's really 5 key elements. Number 1 is value chain collaboration. We can't do this alone, right? We need to work with converters and brands and retailers, waste haulers, recyclers, mechanical and advanced, all levels of government. Number 2, we need better education, right? Americans, quite simply, are confused about what they can and can't recycle. Number 3, We need to have better access. There are a lot of states, including Texas, where a lot of Americans don't have basic access to be able to recycle in the same convenient way that they can throw something away. Number 4, if you put a bottle, a plastic bottle into your bin, it's likely going to get recycled. But if you put a pouch or a tube or film into the bin, it's going to have some challenges. So how do we work through that collection and sortation of sort of non-bottle plastics? And then number 5 is really about building the domestic infrastructure here in the U.S. And we've seen that, especially in advanced recycling, right? By our count, we have over $7 billion in announced projects since 2018 here domestically, many in Texas. So our role as a association that focuses on policy is thinking about what are the policy enablers that are going to enable all of you and our members to invest confidently in America and in the states. So we've worked in 20 states, have passed legislation that ensures that advanced recycling technologies are regulated as manufacturing, not waste disposal. We worked with TCC here, very proud of HB 1953, which passed. Hector probably has the exact margins, but passed overwhelmingly bipartisan majorities in the legislature. And it's been a great success, obviously, of laying down a good regulatory framework. But we are seeing a lot of pushback now from certain groups, unfortunately. We have now taken that to the federal level, and let me quickly just talk about our 5 actions for sustainable change. So we've proposed that Congress sort of take a role here to, again, help our members invest confidently in America. Number 1, let's have a 30% recycled plastic target for all plastics packaging. That includes both mechanical and advanced recycling. Number 2, we need that modern regulatory framework. The work we've done in Texas and other states, let's take that nationally, right? So our members can confidently invest in all 50 states. Number 3, we need some national standards, right? We have 9,000 communities in this country, and they're essentially doing 9,000 different things. And so people are confused. Everybody educates different. They account for recycling or their data is different. So how do we do a better job of sort of, in the way, and this might not be the best analogy, but in the way that Dwight Eisenhower knit the country together with the interstate highway system, how do we do a better job for the recycling system? Number 4, on climate, there's still a lot of voices out there that saying plastics are contributing to climate change. So we say let's have the National Academy of Science go off and do an independent study and look at all materials and then report back to Congress so they can legislate with good data and engineering. And finally, 5, we need an American design producer responsibility system to get the material into the system. So I'll turn it back to Hector now, but that's kind of an overview and look forward to questions in the discussion. Thank you.
That's fascinating, Craig. Looking forward to some Q&A on that. Ron Abbott is a sustainability technology manager for Chevron Phillips Chemical, and Chevron Phillips has really been a change agent around sustainability, and y'all obviously are doing some incredible work around advanced recycling that Craig talked about. Tell us a little bit about what CP Chem is doing and all of the different types of innovations that you're doing in the sustainability space.
Sure, thanks Hector. Really appreciate the chance to be here to share our story. Sustainability is really part of our DNA now. It's amazing how rapidly sustainability has accelerated across the industry. I've been involved in sustainability full-time now for 4 years, and I've never seen any projects accelerate at this pace. It's just amazing. CP Chem is involved in emissions reduction, obviously, a lot of work going on there, being taken very seriously. We're involved with advanced recycling, and I'll tell you a bit more about that in just a moment. And we're actively involved in corporate responsibility and social responsibility actions. We see this as being a holistic approach towards sustainability. And what's really amazing to me is it feels as though we have a small sustainability group and 5,000 employees that are all on the same team. We have a lot of people in the company that are really rallying behind this cry, which is so gratifying to be part of this kind of a team effort. The advanced recycling is really what my role has been over the past 4 years, and the beauty of this is, as Craig was alluding to, we've worked so hard to develop plastic resins that are capable of all kinds of amazing properties and amazing performance. We've lightweighted. We've been able to improve fuel performance in vehicles. We have plastic packaging for food products that are just amazing how they perform. So people have poured their souls into developing these kind of resins and making them as efficiently as possible. Now, as the introduction talked about, We have to find ways to take these materials now and make sure we go from a linear economy to a circular one. That's what our commitment is. And so today we're taking materials, collecting waste plastic with third parties. We have a number of them that have been announced. We are working towards converting those materials to liquids, and then taking the liquids back and converting them back to feedstock and then back to plastics. We're developing plastics that are circular. We call them Marlix anew, and we're really excited about where this momentum has taken us. It's very difficult to do develop emerging technology, but it's really a team sport. So that's really one of the beauties of this kind of a forum, is that we need everyone working collaboratively all the way from industry all the way to academics to pull this together. So excited to see the momentum building, and I think there's a very bright future for plastics in the industry.
Excellent, and some very exciting stuff there. Want to remind you, use your Slido app to be able to send us some questions. After each of our panelists finish their initial remarks, we'll dive into some deeper questions. Our last panelist is Chuck McConnell with the Center of Carbon Management and Energy at the University of Houston. And Chuck, you're the Energy Center officer there. You have a lot of industry experience, and from an academic standpoint now, y'all are doing a tremendous amount of work in this space on a number of energy transition technologies. Tell us a little bit about more about what the center is doing and the work that you're doing with the energy sector.
Oh, thanks, Hector. It's interesting in these forums, people use words like the energy transition and ESG and social governance and corporate responsibility and sustainability. And I would argue that in this group of 800, there's probably about 700 definitions that you'd all offer up. And one of the things, Hector, we're trying to do with a focus on is in terms of the data, the life cycle analysis, and the real information that provides or can provide the informing of opinions, because everybody's got one of those too. And what's interesting for us, to get specific to your question, what is sustainability? And we look at it very simply. First, energy needs to be available and it needs to be reliable. And whether that's plastics or fuels or electricity or anything else, nothing else really matters unless it is available and reliable. And we're seeing that in places around the world right now with political disruptions and everything else. We take it for granted here in this country, but there's over 2 billion people in the world that are in some state of energy poverty. But if you have it available, the second thing you do is you must have it be affordable. It better be cost competitive, and it better not cost the moon for it, because nobody's going to buy it anyway. And so we've got a lot of this discussion around what we need to do next in terms of sustainability. And if it impacts reliable and accessible energy, and if it impacts affordability negatively, you can't get to that higher order of thought, which is the environmental responsibility. And oftentimes people will use sustainability as a singular environmental term. We don't believe that's the case. We believe it better be all three, or it's not really sustainable. So from our perspective, what we're trying to do constantly is driving forward in key areas of technology. Carbon capture, utilization and storage, carbon management, methane management, all of those types of advanced technologies. We're looking at hydrogen as the fuel of the future in many different ways, and especially here in the ship channel, where we probably produce close to 80% of the hydrogen used in this country is in our Houston ship channel along the Gulf Coast. And then we've got an electricity grid that I would imagine everybody in this audience from our area probably pretty familiar with. We've been situations where we've had shutdowns, we've had situations where reliability's been impacted. And so as we advance the cause for sustainability, many people would mistake a race to deploy more renewables as the sustainable goal. And I would argue from our perspective, the race is to reduce emissions. How do you do it most effectively? Not just throwing technology or widgets and gadgets into the marketplace, but to have a real understanding of the impact of what technology choices you're making and the strategy that you're deploying it. And for us, that's what sustainability means.
Well, along that note, you mentioned carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Help our audience understand not only what that really means, because utilization got added to the mix more recently, but also what is all the work that's being done right now in the energy sector to really capitalize on that opportunity.
Well, let's start at the top of that equation, and that is that as we look globally through International Energy Agency, the IPCC, the global community of scientists that have looked at issues like climate change and emissions, I would say that there is one fundamental takeaway, and that is that if we have any chance to meet climate change targets, CCUS, carbon capture, utilization, and storage, is not an option, it's a requirement. And that's the fundamental truth about how important it is in terms of decarbonization for manufacturing industries, for the hydrocarbon industries, and it's not just making fuels, but especially in the area of chemicals. And the decarbonization and the carbon intensity that the chemical industry's faced with in terms of decarbonizing their products globally. So for CCUS, the National Petroleum Council made a study a couple of years ago. It looked at all the places across the country and came up with one conclusion. If you can't do it in the Gulf Coast, you can't do it anywhere. And we're sitting on top of an amazing amount of emissions that are concentrated with oil and gas, with petrochemical, but other manufacturing as well. Power production, cement, steel, you name it. We've got it here. We also have pipeline infrastructure that's essential to being able to make and capture the CO2 that's being emitted from these facilities, the technology to capture it, put it in a pipe, and get it to proximal geology, which, by the way, we have the best in the world along the Gulf Coast and certainly out into the Permian as well. And so we have the perfect storm to make carbon capture, utilization, and storage work. And if we do, we can also enable the hydrogen economy because we'll be able to decarbonize hydrogen and the technology associated with that, which goes right into the chemicals industry. And we also have the chemicals industry itself looking to decarbonize its fuel headers through the utilization of this decarbonized hydrogen. So we have all of the elements necessary to do it effectively, efficiently, if I could use the word sustainably.
Well, you said something really important there. You talked about how carbon capture, utilization, and storage is a necessity for us to achieve success. You also said something important, that what is critically important is the availability and access to energy. We see countries around the globe that are taking very proactive steps to disincentivize the energy sector, to try to drive more innovations around carbon, elimination of carbon. So with regard to that, what is being done in the United States that is really going to drive some of this innovative and success in this sector?
80% of the world's energy is hydrocarbon-based. That's a fact. And if you look at the doubling of energy over the next 30 years in the world, and the fact we're going to be having some 10 billion people walking the earth over the next 50 years, then you have to ask the question, with that amount of additional energy that's going to be required and the analysis that's been done, guess what? with all the renewables, with all of the alternate technologies that's going to be deployed over the next 30 years, long after I'm dead and gone, the world's energy will still be 80% fossil fuel. Now, there's a tremendous amount of growth and tremendous amount of renewables, but at the end of the day, the hydrocarbon industry is the backbone. And here's another fact that's kind of interesting. You talk about the United States. 14 states in this country provide 85% of the energy that's consumed in this country. Electricity, plastics, materials, all those things. Think about that. 14 states, 85% of the country's energy. So all of the people that don't make enough energy to supply their own needs, they're in a wonderful country where they can get it from somewhere else quite easily. But to your point, there are many places in the world that don't have that convenience, that don't live in that luxury. And in a situation like that, it gets back to us here putting together technology that can be accretive to those places in the world that don't have the advantages that we do. If we do that, we can solve the problem. But if all we're doing is solving our own problem or a problem that exists in some small country in Europe, it doesn't matter because the real issue is Asia, China, India, Indonesia.
So, an audience question that came in that I think is relevant to everybody here is that, as industry is clearly taking on this challenge, and there's an incredible amount of innovation. And let me tell you, this is an important time in I think the petrochemical industry, because we're starting to see innovations similar to what we saw during the World War II to solve real problems that require meaningful solutions. And so I really think there's an important time frame in front of us here. The question is, as our industries, both the chemical sector and the energy sector, are focused on sustainability, the return on investment is obviously a challenge in many of these spaces. How is the return on investment in these innovative spaces impacting industry's ability to engage and be successful and monetize these innovations? Let's start on the plastic side of things.
Well, I'll jump in first. We're acutely aware that these materials are going to be more expensive. It's just a fact of the matter. You don't have, oops, something happened. We have an emerging industry in the advanced recycling space and in recycling overall. And so one of the challenges we have is ensuring that across the entire value chain, there's cash positive interactions. We have people from the very beginning, from the folks that are collecting and repurposing the plastics, all the way to the brand owner, all the way back to the circle, making sure that across the entire value chain there is a value for everybody. That's got to take place. Sort of the definition of sustainability. So we're acutely aware of that, and it remains to be seen how this plays out. But as we get more scale and as we get more efficiency, we're going to see more and more favorable returns. So something we're working on very, very carefully. So I don't have a great answer for you right now, but I can tell you that it's front and center for us as we continue to develop the most efficient and the most effective pathways.
Craig?
Yeah, I could speak to this from the sort of the macroeconomic standpoint that we see is, so first of all, over 400 companies globally have committed to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation to have much higher levels of recycled plastic in their packaging and products. Here in the U.S., kind of a similar commitment as part of that, the U.S. Plastics Pact, there's 100, I believe, sort of plastic pact activators that make similar pledges, 30% recycled content or sustainably sourced bio-based content in their packaging by 2025. Very, very aggressive goal, but it's there. We're also seeing states starting to mandate this. Washington, New Jersey, California, which is one of the reasons why we've proposed a sort of more of a national target, because the compliance nightmare of trying to figure out 50 state rate and dates for potentially 50 state recycled content mandates be very difficult. So those are kind of some of the demand drivers that we're seeing. Also, we just know that millennials, Gen Z, they want to see their brands delivering more sort of non-virgin plastics to them, whether from, again, renewable or recycled content. So just ending with one quick anecdote. A couple years ago, I was sitting next to somebody who's a buyer. It was at a member dinner, and one particular member. And this person works for a very large converter, very big in food packaging. So very interested in advanced recycling. And they said, look, we have some very aggressive goals that we're being pushed by our customers, the brands, on for recycled plastic. And so I'm going to every single one of my suppliers, like a CP Chem, and saying, what are you going to do to help me reach my goal? Because we have to have our goals to be able to sell to our customers. And they said, we're going to every single one of our suppliers and delivering that message. So from a macro standpoint, the winds are really blowing in that direction. And you see it from a micro standpoint with the price of recycled plastics at very high levels. That is a good demand signal.
Chuck, on your end.
Yeah, from my perspective, it's kind of interesting. And I don't mean to pick on your example, but millennials and Gen Zs, right? Half of these are the ones who are still living in their parents' basements, for God's sake. And they're talking about how much they want and this and that and the other thing. And what are they ready to pay for, okay? That's the question. And I believe strongly that people are clearly interested in magic from the chemicals industry, Hector. That's what they want, okay? They want magic. They don't want to pay a nickel more for it. And it's your job to figure it out. Not my job to use less, right? Because these are the same people that are lined up 7 deep at Starbucks in the drive-through lane, idling their vehicle, on their texting on their phone, waiting for their latte. But they care about the environment, don't they? Okay? I don't think so, see? And that's what the issue is, right? So when we talk about consumer behavior, be careful. People in this country have been spoiled, and rightly so, because we've done it to ourselves. We've given them magic for the last 150 years. And don't tell me plastics are a bad thing. I can remember growing up, we used to have paper wrappers on things, right? Things would spoil. We cutting down trees. You ever been to a paper mill? I mean, all of the things that people don't remember. And here we are today with a plastics industry that's delivered magic in terms of food preservation, medical systems, along with clothing and everything else, building materials. This is an industry that I think in many ways is going to be challenged by those demands, certainly. But don't think for a minute you're going to get a premium. You're not. People are going to want it cheap and plentiful, and that's where the race is.
That's a very important point. And by the way, I have a feeling you're going to be back again in the future, because that's excellent. Make a note of that, Chad. But in reality, you say something that's extremely important. And it's important for our audience to know that all of these innovations and sustainability are going to cost us in the end. And it's going to be an opportunity cost that we're going to have. Brands are committed to buying bio-based materials, and they're willing to pay a premium. But that premium is going to be passed on to their customers. On the energy sector, the more sustainable fuels we're looking at, it's going to increase cost. And so it is going to be an opportunity cost that consumers in our country and around the world are going to have to make as well. So I think that's a really important point. We had a question come from the audience around operational excellence programs with regards to sustainability and how that factors in. Is that been something that y'all have had to deal with a lot at CP Chem?
Oh, huge. There is a lot of work going on in operational excellence and ensuring that we are doing the right things, to ensure that we are documenting what we're doing, and to make sure we level set and then start to reduce, particularly on the emission side of things. But what's really important in this is that just looking at the big picture, we have got to, as a society, we've got to change. And so we're going to have a portfolio of technologies that are available to address for example, on the circular economy. Craig was just talking about some of the recycling methodologies and the demands by brand owners. The brand owners are setting targets, and right now we know that mechanical recycling gets you about 9 to 10%, maybe 14% recycled content, and that's about it. And so it's getting better, but it's going to take time. That's why we see a portfolio of technologies and innovation being really important for us to advance here. So it goes beyond operational excellence. It actually gets into just the very DNA of what you're trying to accomplish as an industry to make sure that you see where the puck is going on a strategic basis. Where are we going to be in 10, 15, 20 years? We're going to be in a lower carbon environment by necessity. We're going to have to address CO2. We're going to have to address emissions, and we're going to have to watch how we get to the targets that we absolutely have to achieve from a climate perspective. And we have to do this without interrupting societal needs. So this is a huge challenge, but on the operational excellence side, to go back to what your original question was, we are doing a lot of work to make sure that we're ensuring that this is a part of our day-to-day operations and make sure that we're keeping our eye on the ball very closely.
Excellent. Chuck, our audience asked a question, what the average cost increase to successfully implement carbon capture is going to be to consumers around the country?
Well, that's a question that gets thrown out a lot. And the premium, the additional cost, et cetera, I can't be specific about that because that's obviously specific to a process, a technology, and an application. What I can tell you is it will be less expensive here in the Gulf Coast than anywhere else in the world because of the infrastructure and what I described earlier. But I think what's more important is what is the competitive alternative if we're truly trying to get to a net zero world and an environment, right? And so there's a lot of competitive alternatives out there, and are we really looking at full life cycle analysis for this? And I'll give you a great example. When's the last time anybody's talked about wind turbine disposal at the end of useful life? And how many ditches you have to dig, and how many of these irreplaceable technology pieces are going to have to get buried? When's the last time somebody's talked about solar panels and the incredibly challenging chemicals inside that solar photovoltaic, which aren't going to be disposed of easily? I'm not suggesting that the hydrocarbon industry doesn't have challenges and needs to move forward. But I think it's really important that we put things on an apples-to-apples basis, and that's what we're trying to do at the University of Houston. We embrace the fact that hydrocarbons are an essential part of our life, that we need to decarbonize, and we need to produce that magic, right? But at the same time, to understand fully what life cycle analysis is in those competitive alternatives, and that's often not brought to bear.
Well, and let me add to that as we look at these pivot points, we talk about renewables, batteries are going to be critically important. You know, we are looking at a pivot point where we need batteries to not last hours, but days. And that's going to be a real pivot point for energy transition. But we also have to think about end-of-life expectations for managing battery technology in addition to the things you described. Craig, in the last few seconds that we've got, let me ask this quick question. What is the single biggest pivot point or barrier within the plastic sector that will help us really break through and get to a point where we have that objective, that goal of 100% recyclability or reuse?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think advanced recycling, right, the technologies work. I think we can kind of see Ron nodding. The challenge really is we think there's all this plastic out there, and so it should be easy to get and obtain and just get to CP Chem and others. But it's spread all over the place. There's different types of plastic. They're in different formats. And so how we kind of collect, sort, and sort of pre-process, improve the quality of it as a feedstock is really kind of the choke point or the part that we have to solve. I mean, there are companies, of course, and CP Chem is one of them, looking at this challenge with different partnerships. So really, it's how you, again, aggregate it, improve the quality, and realize the economies of scale on the feedstock.
Thank you so much. This is a very important and a fascinating topic that we have just begun to have discussions on. You're going to be hearing a lot more about industry progress here. Let's give it up for our panel. Thank you so much for being here, gentlemen. Appreciate it.